Now, this comes against the background of Australia having passed an amended version of a law that has prompted Facebook to ban news. And this bill that has been signed into law is a controversial media bargaining code. And we join on the line right now by Ashraf. Ashraf, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jummah Mubarak and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Inayat, and Jummah Mubarak to you and listeners.
Right, Ashraf, let's talk about this issue. And we are talking about big tech. We are talking about Facebook. And the key issue here is to understand what is the core issue of Facebook versus the Australian government.
Very interesting battle of policy, Brother Inayat. As you know, with globalization in the last decade or two, the power of corporations, multinationals, have superseded that of the nation state. And this is a classical example and case study of the power of big tech. Big tech meaning Facebook, Google, Amazon, Uber, etc. And they power over national government, sovereign policy and regulation. And fortunately, the Australian government has been quite resolute in trying to protect their media system. And I think at the heart of the matter is not just a policy or regulation, but it is the future of democracy and the power of Facebook and Google over democracy and diversity in media. So that is the backdrop to the story. More specifically, this item is about Facebook and Google sucking in all the advertising revenue of the media system all over the world, including South Africa. What this means is the advertising model drives traffic, and they make the money, and they bypass traditional media. And I think that's the heart of the issue.
Yes, I think this is very important in terms of what you are saying and talking about. Obviously, there's big money involved here. We're talking about sucking in the advertising revenue. And this is the reason why, actually it would lead to my next question in terms of why is this so important for media sustainability?
Well, Inayat, as you know, countries like South Africa, India, Brazil, even now Australia, which is a first world country, they are saying, look, what is then the future of our media? I mean, you look into the South African media system, or Australia, or Brazil. These traditional media platforms or publications are losing revenue and readership as a result of big tech and online media domination. The net result immediately would mean most of these publications go down. And when they go down, there is job cuts. And a lot of journalists, professional journalists, are out on the street without jobs. And you know, and I know, in a democracy, when professional journalists don't have work to do, the quality of your democracy decreases. There's no capacity to keep public accountable, to keep government accountable, to keep corporates accountable. And so this is an attack, no less an attack on democracy.
Now, Ashraf, it's important for us to understand because I think many of us that obviously are on Facebook, we Google all the time, and sometimes we don't quite understand the business model behind big tech. And if you could just take us through some of the key issues in describing big tech's business models.
Good question. So basically, particularly big tech, Facebook and Google, the two large global information monopolies, their business model fundamentally is less about providing the search function or social networking. It is essentially data gathering, and the word is called datafication. Datafication is a technical engineering term, meaning that every time any consumer, and that makes 2-3 billion consumers at any given minute, are online or searching, or they are basically networking, social networking, all the data is collected and harvested in real time. And those goes through the algorithmic processing. And that is very opaque. And data is collected on every habit or lifestyle choice of the user. And that is then sold to a variety of players, mainly the advertising industry. So every person on Facebook has a very detailed consumer profile on everything, on what your preferences are, your political preferences, your taste in food, fashion, cosmetics. And then all of that is harvested, sliced and diced, and then on-sold for big money. So basically, Facebook's last net profit was about 39 billion net. It's huge money, of which 65% comes purely of selling the data to the advertising agency. So that is the business model which creates this problem we have.
Very, very interesting. Now, talking about this particular issue in Australia, and obviously the whole question surrounding news in Australia and banning news on Facebook. Now, this clearly impacts on countries. It impacts on democracy, and it's important for us to actually to understand the impact of big tech on erosion of democracy in countries.
Yes, Inayat, we've seen this mainly in the US under the Trump administration, and the very dark side of Facebook and Google came to the fore, where very powerful interests, in this case, right-wing, we call them the alt-right, very powerful corporate interests that have converged with the right-wing. And this is very dangerous. Some of the academics are calling it the age of digital fascism. And indeed, countries like the US under Trump, India under Modi, and Brazil under Bolsonaro, these are openly fascist regimes. And together with large corporate interests, they have converged in promoting right-wing ideology. And sadly, Facebook has played the game purely because the business model allowed them to cut a deal with the devil, as you put it that way, where for money they would then on-sell political behavior of users. And this is how the elections, especially in the US, but other parts of the world, are being formulated using data of ordinary consumers in everyday life. And this is very dangerous for democracy. This means that choices are restricted. This means that powerful interest groups can formulate messages, political messages for particular audiences. And this is what happened in the Trump, and especially in India under Modi. He has very powerful allies in corporate media in India, and Bolsonaro in Brazil, where he has very powerful interest in media in Brazil. And they are squeezing out democracy and free choice.
So just looking at us here in South Africa against what we have been discussing, where does this leave South Africa? Where does it leave our media currently, and also looking at the situation going forward?
Look, sadly, Inayat, as a media researcher, I'm very disappointed with South Africa. Our media generally is pro-corporate. If you just look at the coverage of the COVID debate, every corporate media outlet from News 24 to ENCA, these are all pro-corporate owned media outlets. And they are pumping a narrative into the public domain on certain narratives that is pro-corporate, pro-Western, etc. We are we have very little media diversity. And diversity, I mean, so someone would say, but you've got so many media channels, so many media publications, so many newspapers. Yes, we do, but they're all interlocked. Ownership is interlocked with a few corporate interests. And so although the consumer may think they have choice, but the narrative is very, very a simple narrative of pro-corporate, pro-West, pro-consumer. We have very little alternative media. Fortunately, community media like that we have now with community radio stations, that is the very last domain of independent news, and it should continue, and we should have critical. But sadly, South Africa, I think the current government has a little interest. Sadly, the current ANC administration is vested in the corporate power structures.
Yes, Ashraf,
concerning situation.
sorry, we just lost you there for a quick second, actually. But I think we have got the gist of obviously what we wanted to discuss this morning. And as always, Ashraf, we thank you. We say Jazakallah khairan to you for your time with us here on Salam Media. We wish you well. Have yourself a great Jummah, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Shukran. Thank you for your time, Inayat.
Ashraf Patel, Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself